Hi, my name is Noah Gift, and today I'm going to talk about Google Cloud Functions, which are a great way to do low-code, no-code solutions for data science, data engineering, business analytics. And really what a function does in the Google Cloud Platform is allows you to take a little piece of logic, let's say maybe scraping a website or doing a machine learning prediction or responding to an event like a pub sub event, and then quickly build up something. And in particular, I think many organizations are lacking this sense of urgency, right? Where someone wants a problem solved, not in like a week or not even in a day, but maybe they need a problem solved in an hour. And this particular technology, whether it's the Google Cloud or AWS Cloud, but the serverless kind of function-based technology is a perfect solution for that. So let's go ahead and get started, and we can build a solution just in seconds. Okay, so let's take a look at this Google Cloud Platform here and see how we can use it to build things quickly. I'm going to go and search for Cloud Functions here, and let's go ahead and pull that up. There we go, Cloud Functions. And notice that I have a couple functions here, a change machine and also something that uses other things. But I'm going to start with creating my own, and we'll come back to those. So first, let's go ahead and create a function here. And once I do this, it'll give me a dialog box that says, function name, the region, the trigger. We'll go ahead and say hello here. And notice these trigger types, right? There's the regular web service, which I can invoke from a curl command or a postman or something like that. I can also do pub sub. So this is a great tool for a data engineer, being able to respond to large scale jobs or data proc or Spark or something like this. You can also trigger things like cloud storage, Firestore. There's all these like platform as a service databases and things like that you can trigger. So really it's a building block, a core building block for things in the Google Cloud Platform. Okay, so once I've done this, I'm going to change this to allow unauthenticated invocations so I can quickly prototype things. When you're playing around, I think that's a great way to use the service. And then the next thing I'll do is go through and change my runtime. You can see here that you can use .NET, Go, Java, all these different runtimes. I'm going to pick Python 3.9. And notice that there's this inline editor, which is the default. Most of the time when you start, that's where you want to really stay. Although you can upload zip packages, you can upload things to cloud storage, or you can even hook into Google Cloud's proprietary Git source code management system. Again, inline editor is the way to go. Now notice the requirements.txt here allows you to install third-party libraries. But let's go through here and just look at this hello world here and see that it accepts messages inside of a request here. And you could actually parse a JSON payload if you wanted to, or if there's some kind of a problem, it'll default to hello world. Let's deploy it and then we can play around with it. So notice here that once we start deploying it, it takes a few, let's say like a minute or two to load and fully operationalize things. You can also go into this actions section here and do more things. Like you could, for example, make multiple copies of it or look at the logs. But in general, what you want to play around with is the testing functionality, which is there's a trigger which would allow you to remotely trigger it, or testing, which allows you to test it in the console. And in this particular example, you could just put some kind of payload, and whether it's successful or not, the hello world will just kind of pass things through and respond back to whatever you passed in. In this case, we could say messages hello world. Okay, so once this thing is done, again, it'll take maybe 10, 20 seconds here to finish. Then it'll be able to take that trigger that shows up from the console and actually pass that into the request object. The Google Cloud function will engulf it, parse whatever it needs to parse out, and then return back a result. So we're ready to go. Let's go ahead and test this function. There we go. And we should see the results of our invocation. There we go. Hello world, right? So again, that's kind of a trivial example, but let's make something a little bit more complex. And what we can do is build something from scratch. And so let's go ahead and take a look at how that would work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this more complex function here, which is translate Wikipedia. And if you notice here that it's importing two third-party libraries, it's importing the Wikipedia library, which allows us to parse web pages. And you can see that I had to put those into the requirements.txt file in both scenarios. And then also Google Cloud Translate, which allows me to use the Google Natural Language Processing API. So these are definitely some hard requirements for me to use this. Now, then I just took some sample code directly from the Google documentation here. I mean, this is essentially just some function I copied, and then I went through and I made my own handler here called Translate Test. So you can change the name of the Google Cloud Function handlers, and then I just parse basically entities, language, and sentences. So, what's the Wikipedia page? How many sentences do I want to grab, like 20, 40, 100 sentences? And then what's the language I would like to translate that to? So there we go. That's the whole function in a nutshell. To invoke it, all I need to do is go to testing. And once I go to testing, I can paste in a JSON payload here that will get passed into this cloud function. And notice here that its entity equals Facebook. That would be the Wikipedia page. Sentences would be 20, and then the language would be Spanish. And so if I go through and I test this out, this will invoke this cloud function. And it'll do a lot of work for me behind the scenes, including grabbing a web page and then again using NLP. There we go. So pretty useful service here, and you could see how you could really add a lot of value to an organization very, very quickly by using this kind of technique. And now you could also trigger this via the curl command or postman if you pass in a JSON payload. So this is ready to go, right? It's already a production service, which again shows how powerful it is. Now, another kind of cool way to invoke this, especially if you're building things a lot from the command line, is to use this gcloud functions call. And notice what it does here is it allows us to invoke any Google Cloud function by name, and then also we can do -- data, and it'll pass a JSON payload to that Google Cloud function. So, really in a nutshell, super useful way to invoke things for data engineers. There we go. We got this thing passed in. It's been translated to Spanish. So there's a lot to like about rapidly building solutions with Google Cloud Functions. And really maybe the next thing we can do is try out a different one more example to really kind of hit things home here. So let's go back again to Cloud Functions and let's build another one. And in this case, we'll build one from scratch that's a little bit more complex. So let's go ahead and create a function, and we'll go ahead and make something that returns back change. So I'm going to change the function name here. There we go, create change. And then again, we'll leave everything as HTTP trigger, allow unauthenticated invocations. That looks good. We'll go ahead and say save, next. And again, change the runtime to Python 3.9. Perfect. Now in this case, I can just cut and paste some code because I'm not going to use a third-party library. It's pretty straightforward, and I'll walk through this code. So here we go. Here's a function that uses JSON. It goes through and requests a payload that has the word amount in it, and amount will be the change that I'm going to give. And so then I use a greedy algorithm that finds the largest coins first, uses those, and consumes them until it can get down to an even remainder. So I'm using the Python library, built really standard library to do all this work. So it's pretty straightforward. And then I go ahead and I deploy that. Now, because it'll take a minute or two and we're in a hurry, I can just go to an existing cloud function that I've already created, and we can just test that out because it's the exact same code. So if we go to this existing example here, change machine, I can also go to testing, and I could just put in a trigger. In this case, we'll say amount. There we go. And then I'll say $1.34 or $1.34 here, and then test it out. And it will allow me to really easily get a payload result. So pretty easy to build solutions very quickly with these cloud functions. And finally, we can actually do the same thing we did before, which is we can actually invoke the function that we're calling from the console into the terminal here by using the Google Cloud Functions invocation from the command line. Here we go. We change it to change machine. I go through here and I just clean up the data a little bit. It's just going to be a different JSON payload. We'll say amount, and I'll put in some amount here. Maybe make things a little bit interesting and say $100 and 35 cents. What would be the correct amount of change for that in just coins? So if we go through here and we run this, we see that the calculation would be 401 quarters and then 1 dime. So really, in a nutshell, Google Cloud Functions are an incredibly easy way to do data engineering. And if you're impatient, it's a great tool to use.